welcome to this 60-minute Yin Yoga class. Today is going to be about something which has been occupying at least my mind quite some bit lately, about worrying. So let's get into our first pose. And if you have two blocks, I'm suggesting to have them close by. They might be handy for the class. First pose, wide-kneed child's pose. So if it doesn't work for you to be on your knees, you can always flip it around and be on your back instead. But otherwise, have kind of your big toes touching in, bring your knees wider, but towards your heels, even if it's not really actually in contact. And then allow your forehead to rest either down on a block, which is often quite nice. Or if it feels better for you to have the forehead down onto the mat, feel free, of course, to go for that option. Settle into your pose. Settle into it physically and also mentally. Come into the stillness. First pose, I often like to encourage to just take a bit of time to listen. As you hopefully have closed your eyes and stay in the pose. Listen around yourself, your mat, the room that you're in. What do you hear? Maybe you hear distant sounds outside the house. Maybe you hear some traffic. Maybe you hear people. And if you draw your attention a bit closer within and inside your house, what do you hear? Maybe you're sharing your house together with someone. Maybe you have pets. Or maybe simply the house that is making some noise. Begin then to bring your attention even closer, to be kind of just around your yoga mat. It's almost like you have this shield around your mat, making all the sounds from outside more distant and of less importance. Allow yourself to just be fully present on your mat. Fully arriving into your practice, on your mat, in your body, in your breath. Complete one more cycle of breath. And once it's completed, begin to make your way out of your wide-kneed child's pose. To sit back on your butt with your legs out in front of you. And for the next pose, maybe it feels nice or good in your body to have the blocks maybe not. We'll see what you prefer. So the next pose is a shoelace pose. And we're going to do half shoelace. So bring your leg. I began with my left leg, but it doesn't really matter which one you begin with, to be completely honest. But leg over the other. So my left foot is as close towards my right hip as feels proper in my body. So doing half shoelace begins to feel in my body in two different target areas. The hamstring on the straight leg as I begin to lean forward a bit, and also around the hip buttock area on the bent leg. Here maybe you want to use your blocks. You can use them to support your forearms as you slowly begin to lean forward a bit. As always, allow your eyes to close as soon as it feels that you have begun to settle into your pose. See if you can settle your breath as well. Feels like this time is a lot of us have spent quite a lot of time worrying about catching the virus, worrying about friends and family catching it, worrying about the job, it's a lot of worrying. I saw a funny quote the other day that kind of got me to think a bit more about this theme of worrying. And the quote went like this: worrying, that's a hard word to say, worrying works. 90% of the things I worry about never happen. Take 2 more rounds of breath in your hold. And for the last minute in the hold, after those 2 rounds of breath, see if you can bring your body weight even a tiny bit further forward. Doesn't have to be much. Maybe you just simply allow the head to drop a bit closer towards the knee. As always, we're looking for sensations without turning it into sensational. It is a clear line between those two. Sensational borders often in towards pain, which is where we definitely do not want to be. And then from this slightly more forward, begin to make your way, your upper body, to a more upright position. Keep the leg where it is. And we'll lean to the side. So I'm leaning to the side where my foot is. So I'm leaning towards the right. And what we want to create here is a side stretch on the left side. So since it's my left leg which is on top, It's my left side that I want to stretch. You can either, like I did, have the hand into the floor, or my personal favorite is to lean the elbow on the high edge on the block to be a bit more lazy. This way it kind of takes a bit of load off my heavy head. Again, sensations, not sensational. And sometimes the sensations can be a bit hard to find in the side bends that we are trying to find in this position. But so basically, sensations is just a gentle pull. I feel it down from my left hip towards my left waist. Feel a bit of compression, of course, on the flesh on the right side, as the skin there is like being squished together. Try to not have your upper body and the top shoulder drawing down towards the floor too much in your attempt to lean to the side. We look for discomfort. As said, Yin Yoga is not comfy yoga. If we're looking for comfy yoga, then maybe restorative and similar. But Yin Yoga, we're kind of looking for this discomfort in the poses. Where we should still be able to breathe without any restriction. We should still be able to soften and relax the face. You have 1 more minute in the hold. Worrying. Worrying works. 90% of the things I worry about never happen. It made me smile a bit when seeing that. Because it is that. We're worrying and using our imagination to worry about things that are most likely never going to happen. If and when shit hits the fan, so to speak. Then, of course, it's proper to worry. But that's not really what we're doing most of the time. Time, though, to come out of the side bend. Keep your leg as it is. Slowly come out of your side bend. And we're going to take this into a twist. So you can keep your leg exactly as it is and twist to this way. Or if it feels like it's not really working for you, you can take the foot and place it into the floor and come into your twist. For me, actually, it felt quite nice to still be in the pose. So take the time to wiggle yourself around into the pose. Seated twists are sometimes a bit trickier than the supine ones. But in this one, your lower body is quite fixed and still, where where it is. And the twist kind of comes from your waist. Again, there's no active pulling into the twist. As always in twists, I like to bring the awareness towards the belly to really continue to encourage the belly breathing. So even if the midsection of your body, your abdominals, feels like twisted and a bit compressed, still do your best to bring the breath down into the belly. Even if the belly might not have as much space as usual to expand in. You have passed halfway through the twist. See if there is room to potentially take your twist a bit deeper. Once you've potentially done that adjustment, then again come into soften. And bring the awareness back to your breath. So when I bring my deeper breath into the belly, I actually feel it up towards my shoulder blades. I know it's a bit of a weird thing, but just feeling how the breath we're going. Feel some sensation up towards the upper back. Would you say that you are a person who worries a lot? If and when you do worry, what are you worrying about? With your next inhale, slowly come out of your twist. And decide if you want to come down on your back and hug your knees in towards the chest, or if you want to come into a child's pose. For me, it just felt like a nice one to come down on the back, to bring the knees into the chest. We'll stay here for about 10 to maybe 15 rounds of breath. Just kind of neutralizing before we begin the sequence on the second side, or the second leg. Regardless if you're in child's pose or like me down on your back, notice your belly hitting the knees or the thighs rather as you breathe. Last round of breath. Maybe it feels nice to just bring in a tiny bit of movement. You're down on your back. Just kind of notice what feels good. eventually making your way up into seated position, as we're going to do shoelace on the second side. So this time bring your other leg on top. In this case it's my right leg, meaning that my right foot comes close towards my left hip. Oops. And maybe the blocks to support your forearms as you lean forward. Worrying. I think we've all heard those sayings like worrying is like paying a debt you don't owe. Or another one that I really liked, which was worrying is like walking around with an umbrella waiting for it to rain. And sure enough, eventually it will rain. But how many days are we walking around with that umbrella and not using it? It is this in my opinion at least, unnecessary baggage. If we're taking the comparison of using or walking around with the umbrella, we're carrying all that extra weight regardless of how light maybe the umbrella is, but we're constantly carrying it around. Extra weight. And kind of just waiting. Good and bad, there are so many things, of course, that we can worry about. We can use our imagination to create one horrible scenario after another. Imagine how this or that could happen. Or we can use that imagination to think about all the awesome things that can happen. Speaking about can happen, maybe for this last minute, you feel that you have room to lean a tiny bit further forward. Again, it's not about sensational, it's not about getting into pain. No yoga practice is this no pain and no gain situation, but definitely not Yin Yoga, as we are working with the joints, the connective tissue. With your next inhale, come out of your forward fold. I'm wondering how much of this you hear. There's a bit of street cleaning going on, so lovely outside. Time for the side bend. So again, I have my right leg on top, and I'm leaning to the left side so that I can stretch and lengthen the right side of my body. And sometimes the other arm, it's a bit tricky to know where to best place it. So try to find something that feels like a good placement for you. Come to settle into your hold, to your pose. Worrying. It is definitely this use of our imagination, but it's use of the imagination creating something that we of course don't want. Imagine if we could do that little switch to begin to use the imagination for stuff that we would want to happen. Things that we want to create for ourselves. The problem I feel, at least with when I come into the worrying, it's that it's destroying here and now. When worrying about what will happen later on or tomorrow or the day after tomorrow, it is a very effective way of destroying now and the potential of enjoying now. You have one last minute in the hold. Bring your awareness to here and now, to the sensations which are in your body. Maybe you feel less, maybe you feel more in the hold. Allow yourself to adjust accordingly. Whenever you feel that your thoughts are getting too far away from you and what's happening right here and right now, just bring the awareness back to your breath. Speaking of breath, with your next inhale, slowly come up. It's time for the twist. So remember, you have the option of placing the foot onto the floor with the knee bent if you prefer this variation. For me, it's quite nice to still have the half shoelace feel, and then allowing the upper body to rotate. What I did was using a block for my backhand to bring the floor kind of closer. I want you to stay in the twist, even if I am not in the pose so much. worrying. You have all these what ifs, worrying about what might go wrong, what might happen. And we're quite good with our imagination, creating one scenario after another. And I'm not saying to just stop worrying or to ignore when we do worry. We all know just ignoring, kind of pushing back on it, is not a very successful method of handling things. But it's kind of trying to catch it and break the vicious cycle. You have one last minute in your twist. See if there's an adjustment you want to do in your twist. Maybe you can bring the breath a bit more down into your belly and just allow the belly to really participate in the breath. It's breaking the vicious cycle of worrying. To kind of catch yourself when you're doing it. It's like, oh, there I go, worrying again. Or, interesting. I found myself worrying. But doing it from a gentle perspective, not the mean, judgmental perspective. With your next inhale, gently come out of your twist. Straighten the leg. Maybe place your hands behind your butt, legs out in front. Allow your eyes to close, and without that counter movement, simply sitting with the legs straight. Noticing. Maybe you feel a lot coming out of the pose, maybe you don't feel much at all. Then coming to child's pose. Again, if child's pose for whatever reason doesn't work for you, feel free to come to your back instead. And this time though, in child's pose, your knees together. You can do the same with a block. I also like to often just simply make fists and use the fists for support for my forehead. So I want you to come into your child's pose. I'll make my way out of the pose, but for you, please come into child's pose. And if there's anything you can do to be 5-10% more comfortable in your child's pose, feel free and adjust yourself into that. Again, when we're doing child's pose, yin style, it's different than when we do child's pose in the more active yang yoga classes. in child's pose yin way, we want the spine to round. It's a forward fold, so we kind of want to make ourselves almost as small as possible, to not necessarily think, especially if you're more pliable, like more bendy, flexible, or how to put it, to not think necessarily forehead to the floor, but if anything, the crown of your head towards the floor. To draw your nose in towards your knees, to round your spine. Again, as much of your weight as possible resting down towards your heels. So it's almost this imagination of the spine, the discs in the spine, the vertebrae in the spine, how we're creating space between them. We kind of unhook them from each other, creating space where perhaps there was not so much space before. Which is basically the whole idea with yoga, the way I see it, to create space. Create space in the physical body by ridding the body from tension. Sometimes when there's excess, as we begin to move the body in certain ways, that might give away. And we find ourselves having less tension holding us back. So we're creating more space in the physical body that way. But also that we're creating space mentally. Maybe with the same thing there as getting rid of tension in the physical body, we can get rid of tension in the mental body. For instance, if we learn to catch ourselves when we're worrying, and if we can learn to break that vicious cycle of constantly worrying, then we're creating space mentally. Space to not worry. Space to use the imagination in something more powerful, something more supportive, encouraging. From your child's pose, begin to make your way down on your belly. Take your time. There's no rush. Maybe simply stack your hands on top of each other to rest your chin or your forehead. Allow the breath to deepen into the floor, into your mat. With your next inhale, lifting your upper body into Sphinx pose. In Sphinx pose, elbows sort of placed underneath the shoulders as we're creating a back bend. So somewhere in your lower back, is where the back bend begins to happen. Some maybe feel straight up a lot of sensation. If that's the case for you, allow your elbows to move further forward. And just to kind of find the softness and relaxation in the pose. With your next inhale, squeeze your buttocks. Really squeeze, 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 squeeze. And then relax. Again, inhale, squeeze your buttocks, really activate them. Strong. And then relax. Last one. Inhale and squeeze. And relax. Often that little squeeze and relax softens in the lower back as well. Allow your head to be placed in a position that feels good for you. Maybe you keep your head upright, or maybe you drop it towards the floor. If the head feels way too heavy, of course you can use your block, but you can also place your chin in your hands or the forehead in the hands. Whichever feels like a good option for you. The physical areas of the body that we want to create space in are often areas where we're holding a lot of tension. Areas such as the lower back, hips, shoulders, often physically we are more aware of the tension we're holding. Mentally it might be a slightly different thing. It's harder to become as aware of the tension. And even though, or just because it's hard to detect it, unfortunately doesn't mean that there isn't any tension there. I said, for instance, we have a lot of thought patterns that create tension, that create less than ideal situations. Worrying is one of those. I find Yin being one of the more beneficial practices for me. It's my meditation, my way of both centering my thoughts and at the same time creating distance in them or towards them. From your Sphinx pose, begin to transition yourself over on towards your back. And once you're down on your back, we have one pose before Shavasana, and it's a supine butterfly pose. So with the feet into the floor, the knees bent, then bring the feet together and allow the knees to begin to open out to the sides. If you feel that your hips or your groin is straight up kind of complaining, you can place the blocks to support your thighs. I like to angle my blocks so I don't have the sharp edge of the block into the flesh. Maybe you place your hands on your belly to breathe into your belly. Maybe you draw your arms out into a T or a cactus position. Creating space. With worrying, as I was mentioning before, it's not so much about the notion of completely stopping to worry or not worrying anymore, but it's to begin to be aware of when doing it. To catch yourself when it's happening. To kind of label it. Worrying. But not in a negative manner. Not like, oh, I'm so stupid, now I'm worrying again, or, oh, just typical me. So typical, always worrying. Trying to label without judgment. Now I'm worrying. Worrying about work. Worrying about my health. Worrying about my family. Catch yourself doing it. And try to not, like Alice, go down the rabbit hole. Try to not continue on that worrying imagination, down the rabbit hole, off you go kind of a thing. If you are super comfortable where you are, or if you feel that by adjusting this or that, this is a good place to stay, feel free to take this as your Shavasana today. If you are not completely comfortable, maybe straighten the legs, place the blocks underneath your legs for a bit of support in Shavasana. Do that instead. Make your way into your Shavasana. To find your rest. Allow yourself to create space. Allow your breath to be soft. Allow your body to release as much of the tension as you manage. Allow your body, your limbs to become heavy. Noticing how your body is in contact with the floor underneath you. Allowing the feet to relax. Allowing the ankles and the calves to relax. Allow your knees, the front of your thigh and the back side of your thighs to relax. Allow your hips and your buttocks to relax. Allow your pelvis, allow your lower belly and your belly button to relax. Allow the entire belly, lower ribs, the rib cage, the upper chest, the entire front side of your body is relaxed. Allow your lower back, your middle back, your upper back, your neck, the back of the head. Allow it to relax, the entire back side of your body. Allow it to relax. Allow your face to relax. The jaw relaxes. Temples. Space between the eyebrows. The hairline. The roots of your hair. Allow the forehead to relax. Allow yourself to create the space that so many of us seek. you want to stay longer in your Shavasana, honor that. When you're wanting to come out of the pose, roll to your left side. Keep your eyes closed. Bring the knees up towards the chest as you lay on your left side, breathing. From the left side, use your right arm to push down into the floor, to push yourself to a seated position. If you want to stay seated for a meditation or pranayama practice, honor that. When your practice is coming to its end, bring your hands together in front of your heart. Thank yourself for the space you've created in your physical body. Thank yourself for the space you created in your mental body. Namaste.